Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another Ace in the Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's instalment I shall be reviewing the Yak-3P. To give you a brief historical overview on the Yakovlev Yak-3P, having already provided a historical overview of the Yak-3 in general, which you may see using the link in the top right corner of your screen, as displayed now, the Yak-3P was developed in the early half of 1945, most predominantly in the first couple of months. The idea was to essentially take the standardised Yak-3 model and change out the armament from 2 12.7mm machine guns and 1 20mm cannon to 3 20mm B-20 Reisen cannon. The idea in doing this was to increase the overall burst mass of the plane whilst maintaining the overall agility and performance of what was one of Russia's finest fighters. The net result was a plane that had a higher burst mass, but additionally was a little bit more agile due to the lesser weight of a heavier armament. Moreover, the same Klimov VK-105PF engine was employed, providing 1,300 horsepower to the plane. The plane saw very limited service during the course of World War II, with the plane being introduced to production lines and service as of April 1945, extending all the way round to the middle of 1946. As of August 1945, the Yak-3P was the only Yak-3 type to be produced, with 596 being built throughout its career. The Yak-3P goes down in history as one of the latter Yak series of aircraft which never really saw much frontline service, but was in its own right one of the finest Russian aircraft to be made towards the end of the Second World War. With that being said, how exactly does the Yak-3P handle in game? Well, I have quite mixed feelings about the Yak-3P, and I'm going to highlight exactly why. We first cast our mind back to the Yak-3. As we remember, it is a battle rating 4.0 plane, and, in my review, I stated that it was a very good low-altitude fighter which could quite easily dominate the situation by restraining your opponents from achieving higher altitude positions. The same can be said of the Yak-3P. Taking off the right hand wing of that Yak-9K and then coming around on the P-47D struggling for energy, as we can see, it's my inability to put my shots on target all the time which is slowing me up in this regard, as I clench my second kill. We're up at 4,300 metres, and, much like the original Yak-3 counterpart, we're able to climb very well from lower altitudes up to moderate altitudes. However, the same restrictions apply. The Yak-3P is a plane which performs very well in an altitude range of 0, i.e. ground level, all the way up to roughly 5,000 metres. As soon as you hit the 4,000 to 5,000 metre range, this performance drops off drastically, and as a result highlights the necessity to keep your fights low. Of course, with a battle rating of 4.7, you go up against a lot stiffer competition in the form of planes such as the P-51D Mustang, the Messerschmitt 109 G2, and other counterparts. Ergo, your role at the beginning of a game, as I found with the Yak-3P, is one where you have to deny higher altitudes for your opponents. Planes such as Focke-Wulf 190 D9s and F8F Bearcats will all try to rush to higher altitudes, and fortunately you are able to climb with them. The only exception of course is the Bearcat, which can now climb you slightly. However, you can still maintain overall energy and take the fight to the Bearcat before he or she, i.e. the pilot, is able to creep away above 5,000 if not 6,000 metres. I went after a B-17E Flying Fortress there, making one pass and taking out one of the pilots. The problem with the Yak-3P is, for all its armament, it has very little durability. As a result, you have to essentially use this in some instances as a glass cannon. I dive down that Focke-Wulf 190 A5, getting a pilot kill and taking a light bit of fire on my left hand wing and my main fuselage, achieving my third kill. I fly past the Spitfire Mk and now I'm looking around to see where I'm taking incoming fire. It turns out that an enemy Lag-3 was spraying and hit me with one of their 12.7mm machine gun rounds. Carrying on this very elongated boom and zoom dive, I notice an enemy Yak-9 going after a friendly, and then I look at this Messerschmitt 110, who I soon open fire on. My burst achieves a hit, especially on their right hand flap, and I just continue to fly past, taking some more glancing fire from that 110's rear gunner. I then see another Focke-Wulf 190 A5, and I proceed to kill their pilot for my fourth kill. So, Thus far we have highlighted that the Yak-3P climbs well in the lower altitude range, and it does indeed perform rather well in extended boom and zoom passes. We should also note that the overall manoeuvrability of the plane seems to start to become a little bit sluggish at a speed of roughly 650 to 700 km an hour. Extending above this will compromise this even more. We pick off that Yak-9T very cleanly and easily to achieve our ace, simply because they were not focused on the situation at hand. As a result, the Yak-3P does very well because of the mixture of a very accurate armament in the nose and its overall desire to maintain manoeuvrability up to the highermost speeds. Your roll rate is quite interesting. It's the same as the Yak-3 to be honest, and we're going to show here how we're able to dodge a good portion of incoming fire from an enemy King Cobra, the P-63C5. We come up underneath them, making a quick burst but only achieving a glancing hit, and so we carry through. We're already using our superior manoeuvrability, which I'll come on to even more in a minute, in order to get behind the King Cobra, although an enemy Typhoon Mark 1A also comes over to engage, and this enters a 2-on-1 scenario. The King Cobra has been taken out by a friendly Typhoon, so we're back to the 1-on-1, although this enemy Typhoon is gradually breaking away, a foe I cannot catch in the Yak-3 because the Typhoon is much quicker. However, the Typhoon comes around again, and I also have to dodge the incoming fire from a PBJ. We're back into a 2-on-1, although the Typhoon Mark 1A here is being chased by multiple friendlies. As a result, I try to hover above and break out of the way of incoming fire from friendly planes. Levelling out, I see a Focke-Wulf 190A series, A1 in particular, break past me, at which point I rudder and wing over in order to come round on the Focke-Wulf, simply because the Yak-3P is a highly manoeuvrable plane. And, achieving a nice hit on that Focke-Wulf 190A1 but not able to convert it into a kill, I follow through and finish off, achieving my 6th kill, and keep an eye on this enemy PBJ1 who seems to be rather resilient and coming after everyone. As I level out and begin to fly away, I use my rather good acceleration, much like on the original Yak-3. I hope that in that furball there we demonstrated the overall manoeuvrability of the Yak-3P, and I will be honest, it feels much easier to handle than the Yak-3, and that might be a reciprocation of the overall historical nature of the Yak-3P being slightly lighter by roughly 24 kilograms due to the exchanging of the armament. As a result, you can always feel just a little bit more aggressive in the dogfight by comparison with other planes of your battle rating. Indeed, by comparison with planes such as the Typhoon Mark 1B late, you're a superior plane in pretty much all regards if you're going to turn fight. I would also advise turn fighting at a starting speed of roughly 400 to 450 km an hour, as that is where the plane seems to respond to the best possible capabilities. We go for this P-63A10 King Cobra, achieving a nice critical on their tail, and then leave them to achieve our 2nd assist. As we can see, once again we are utilising the overall energetic nature of the Yak-3P down low in order to pick up foes quite quickly, although most of these foes have been isolated. I now move on to some of the problems with the Yak-3P, because as I said, I've got mixed feelings about this plane. From the outset, the armament. While I do like my guns to be loud and proud, 320mm cannons all based around the nose section, especially on a plane such as this, is a bit of a problem, in my opinion. The reason being that at larger distances, these cannons are very hard to track onto target, unless it's say a bomber or a ground attack aircraft with quite a large wingspan. Opening fire beyond 0.5 km and getting a successful hit on a plane that's manoeuvring and jinking all around the place is very difficult, because you need to give a significant portion of additional lead. As a result, in most situations depicted in this game, although there are a couple where I try to be over aggressive and overreach, I always try to open fire at closest possible range as I can, in order to make the most of my armament. It is for this reason I am using omni-purpose ammunition and not stealth ammo, because the overall need to give lead with the cannons means that I want to be accurate, and to be accurate I need to be able to see my tracers rather than just guess when the cannon shells are going to hit via the stealth ammunition. In addition to that, I am using the standardised 500m gun convergence, as I do always for all planes with armament based around the nose section, with one cannon firing through the propeller hub and the other two mounted above the engine. I'm also using a 30-minute fuel load, and this is going to come round and be of great use towards the end of this game. We are on the ground strike map Paradise Island, a map which really does highlight exactly where the Yak-3P fits in a very fierce competition. I now carry on with why I personally have mixed feelings about the Yak-3P. In addition to the fact you have to get very close and be very accurate with your armament, you also have a limited ammo capacity. 380 rounds with 260 of those based for the cannons above the engine and 120 for the cannon based in the nose is a little bit short, and therefore you can lose ammo quickly. Another point to note is the overall durability of the Yak-3P. That head-on with that Messerschmitt 109F series there took out my left landing wheel. Now at first I shrugged my shoulders and thought, well, I'm not going to need that. However, it's quite ironic, as you're going to see. Another mistake I've made here is the fact that I've gone head to head with 3 planes all coming out of their spawn, which puts me in a very difficult situation. I also did a head-on with a P-47D Thunderbolt and a Messerschmitt 109mm. The nice thing is, by having the armament all based in the nose and therefore in a very accurate nose cone, head-to-heads can be very diversive, in the fact that you have got the ability to put a significant amount of burst mass onto an opponent and therefore cause them to jink out the way. As a result, you can apply pressure via head-ons, although due to the limited durability of this plane, I would not recommend constantly using head-ons to try and secure kills, as sooner or later the head-on is going to bite you in the back and cause you to lose parts of your plane. I've already lost my landing gear, I've taken now significant damage to both my left wing and my main fuselage, and things will only get worse. As I climb away, I make use of my superior climb rate to most contemporaries in order to put myself up at 3,850 meters altitude before winging over. It means that I can use my superior accuracy of armament to take out that Messerschmitt 109mm, although, as you can see, even with their lighter armament of 2 MG cannons, 20mm in calibre, and 2 7.92mm machine guns, they've done significant damage and now have compromised my left wing's structural integrity. Moreover, my right hand wing is now starting to show dark red, which means that I'm in a bit of a situation where I can no longer afford to keep getting hit. I go for another head on with a Messerschmitt 109F4, the same one from earlier I believe, who flies past me and tries to bring themselves around. Although my good speed on the level means that I can escape accordingly and pull enough distance before the 109F4 can bring its guns to bear. It's at this point that I jink out because I see another Messerschmitt 109F series coming after me, and this is the mistake I made with attacking the enemy head on from their spawn. I've now had to fly past the spawn again to foes which have got quite a bit of energy already, despite the fact that they've had to turn to come after me. Still, we are highlighting here exactly how quick the Yak-3P is, and the fact that up at an altitude of 2,371 meters, we're able to accelerate away very nicely by comparison with a Messerschmitt 109F4, or indeed other contemporaries. Ergo, it would seem so far that I've highlighted the way to beat the Yak-3P is to force it to put itself into a situation of compromise. As I go head to head with this F4 again, with a very small burst, I take a glancing hit from the 20mm cannon. Whereas at this point, with a crippled plane, I demonstrate that even when crippled, the Yak-3P is a very manoeuvrable aircraft and can evade a dangerous situation. I want to highlight now that due to the overall compromised structural nature of the plane, I absolutely struggle to bring my guns onto target. As you see here, I overshoot with the F4 going into a stall turn, and then as I loop up, I use the rudder to bring me over and around, although due to the very poor structural integrity, I find it a bit of a struggle in order to get myself around onto target and finish the 109F off. As a result, I have to let it go, but we've managed to live we've managed to live for another day, and that is what this was all about. A friendly Spitfire comes over to help deal with this Dornier 217J here, and I only have 134 rounds left, and I'm going to depict what happens when I open fire at long distance. As you can see, I only graze the target, and as I continue to open fire, most of my shots fall short because I haven't given enough convergence lead. As a result, I have to reload and let the Spitfire start putting rounds in. Although this is a joint adventure, I'm giving ample clearance for the Spitfire Mk to do its damage. The Dornier's left engine is now on fire, at which point I'm awaiting a reload to finish off the target. Having reloaded, I've banked out in order to put a little bit of distance between myself and the Spitfire and the Dornier, and then I brake back in to avoid any possible collision. As we can see, the armament goes to work very nicely, gradually taking apart the Dornier 217 with time and waiting for the opportune moment, focusing on the right hand wing in order to try and take that off, rather than going for the main fuselage. In the end, I believe I might have killed the pilot, alternatively the pilot has bailed out. However, that is 8 kills now in the bag, and I accordingly apologise to my teammate in the Spitfire Mk for what could be interpreted as a potential kill steal. I'm now going to return to my discussion of how to beat the Yak-3P exactly. The trick with beating the Yak-3P is to force it to compromise, as I said earlier. This plane does very well down low and is one of the most deadly planes down low. It's got a very high burst mass and brilliant manoeuvrability with speed. As I've already iterated, the best speed for dogfighting in this plane is roughly 400 to 450 km an hour, although your overall manoeuvrability range extends from, I'd say, 300 to just shy of 600 km an hour. I break down here on a Focke-Wulf 190 A5, achieving a nice critical, and then I focus my attentions on, I believe, what was a Messerschmitt 19F, achieving my 9th kill. The fact that you have such manoeuvrability in this plane, and indeed overall acceleration, and I take some grazing hits from an I-16 here that's already dead, the fact you've got such manoeuvrability and versatility with speed means that in order to beat the Yak-3P, you have to either force it to overspeed, and indeed there is a roll rate lockup and indeed overall control surface lockup at 700 km an hour, or you have to force it to have very little speed, i.e. if it drops below 250 km an hour, it's a dead yak, simply because the stick will be very unresponsive and the plane will start to be very sluggish, as depicted in that dogfight with the Messerschmitt 19F4 earlier. I intercept an enemy Spitfire Mk in order to achieve our 10th kill, and as I take a look around at the stat screen, and I'm wondering why I'm doing this at this point, oh yes, because I'm almost out of fuel, I'll now carry on to another item of interest. What is interesting about the Yak-3P is that attacking it head on actually works in your favour. Yes, there is a very significant burst mass in the nose, as I've already said, and it's accurate. However, because it is in the nose, that means that the pilot flying the Yak-3P has to get the nose onto target 110%. As a result, pilot kills on Yak-3Ps are quite a often occurrence. Planes such as the Focke-Wulf 190 A5 will have no trouble in shredding a Yak-3P in a head-on, simply because if you're able to bring your guns onto bear, especially if they're in the wing, a lot earlier, you can therefore go for the central fuselage of the Yak-3P and hopefully get a pilot kill, if not take a wing off. It's at this point that I'm starting to be very grateful for the fact I always load a 30-minute fuel load. With my 11th kill in the bag on that Focke-Wulf 190 A5 from earlier, I'm proceeding back to land. Although do remember I have no landing gear and I've only got 24 seconds of fuel left. So things are going to have to be a little bit tight. Although the Yak-3P in my opinion is, and indeed a Yak-3 in general, is one of the easiest aircraft to land because it's so smooth on landing. Another alternative to beating the Yak-3P is of course to drag it up to higher altitudes. Indeed, I've noticed a lot of pilots will try to force me, when I'm flying my Yak-3P, to engage them up at 5,000 metres or more, and this is a common occurrence when I'm in a game where there's a lot of B-17s. We made that pass on a B-17 earlier, and I did that as a harassment pass. I went for the cockpit because I know if I go for the rear gunners I'm probably going to lose my wings or have a fuel tank fire erupt onto the plane. As a result, harassment passes on the cockpits of B-17s, Year 2s and planes of that calibre will allow you to occasionally achieve pilot kills, but not only that, try to shrug the bombers' attentions from flying high and bombing the bases to dive low and survive. However, in those games as well, because the bombers are usually at 4,000 metres to begin with, if not higher, once they reach the 5,000 metre ceiling, as I like to refer to it, the Yak-3P starts to fight a losing battle. It can no longer climb as well as it used to down low, and planes such as the P-51D Mustang and the Typhoon Mark 1B to an extent, although it's similar to the Yak-3P in overall performance with altitude, planes of those calibre will start to gain the upper hand in overall performance with altitude. So, there are three main ways really to beat a Yak-3P. You force it to play higher, you force it to bleed energy, or you force it to overspeed. If you force it to go to too high a speed, the roll rate and other responsive items will begin to lock up, and so chasing a diving Yak-3P might work to your advantage if you're in, say, a Focke-Wulf 190 D9 with a superior roll rate at higher speeds. We return to the fact that I am landing at this point, and without any fuel left in the tank, or indeed any landing gear, I've got to bring this plane down on its belly. Although as you're going to see, the plane will want to list to the left as I land, simply because the left hand wing has taken a lot more damage than the right hand side of the plane. And that's one thing to note about the durability of the Yak-3P. Unlike a lot of Russian aircraft in this game, once it's taken damage on one side, i.e. one wing, it will begin to list in that direction accordingly for a good portion of its manoeuvres. I bring the plane down on its belly and grind along the nose, damaging the propeller, and safely landing it, without being listed as a death or even a crash landing. As a result, I decide to check just to make sure that I'm not just dreaming things, and I wait for the plane to repair. And this is the first time I've ever landed a plane without any landing gear or indeed any fuel and actually got away with it. So, are there any other points to consider? Well, of course with the altitude performance range, that means that a lot of you will probably be asking, well, why would I ever want to take the Yak-3P any higher? Well, the reason why I like to try and force the Yak-3P up to 5,000 meters at the early start of a game is, of course, to force down those who perform better up high. And indeed, in a lot of games, you'll find if you take the initiative from the start and go after proactively hunting the Messerschmitt 109 G2s, the Focke-Wulf 190 D9s, and planes of that caliber, you will control the game and help your team win by a mile. By hunting the enemy high altitude fighters from an early position, you'll indeed actually provide security and safety for friendly heavy bombers. And with that being said, that is the end of the game, as I've taken off, and it's time to look at some post-game stats. So, in reflection we see that our 11 kills and 2 assists netted us 21,995 silver lines. Additionally, we earned 1,883 research points, with all of those going towards our research on the LA-7B20. We conclude this review by noting that the Yak-3P is an uprated Yak-3 with a higher battle rating of 4.7. What this means in terms of the plane is that the plane performs much like its predecessor, very good at the speed range of 400 to 450 km an hour, with overall responsiveness in the ailerons, the elevator, and indeed the rudder being very good and easily controlled. If you cannot turn fight with a plane such as the Spitfire Mk or the A6M3 Mod 22 Reisen, you can boom and zoom them. And the vice versa applies when going up against Messerschmitt 109 G2s and Focke-Wulf 190 D9s. You will be able to outturn these aircraft when they perform better in the vertical capacity. The switching of the armament for 320mm cannons is good, but it will lead you into a sense of overconfidence, I feel, because with all the armament concentrated in the nose cone, that means that if you're going to go head on with someone, you've got to expose your pilot to enemy fire, whilst bringing your own fire to bear. As a result, I want to point out now that in this game I made a lot of mistakes, and the most important one was I went for multiple head-ons through the enemy spawn point. I was fortunate to get away with it, receiving only minor damage which ascended into heavier damage to my plane. However, on a number of occasions I've been led into this false sense of confidence and it's cost me the plane and my pilot. By comparison to the rest of our team, we see that we came fourth, and we applied ourselves where necessary in order to try and contribute to what was a very difficult and long game. Unfortunately, we couldn't pull off the win, although I hope this has been a very good demonstration of how Yak-3P, employed much like the Yak-3 in the altitude suppression role, can force most higher altitude fighters which you'll see at the battle rating, and these include the P-51D Mustang, Focke-Wulf 190 D9, the Messerschmitt 109 G2, the Japanese Ki-84-80 Co, and other planes of that caliber. I hope this iterates how you can suppress those planes and force them to fight at lower altitudes and therefore on your terms. At the same time, do not be afraid to attack B-17s, although do remember that position is key, and attacking a B-17 from the front and aiming for the cockpit with your 320mm cannons is much more likely to pull off a pilot kill, rather than you trying to attack it from behind and getting shredded by 12.7mm rounds from the rear. This plane does not have the best durability, much like the Yak-3, and so successive hits to the wings by incendiary rounds will set the wings on fire, or just take your wing cleanly off. Other than that, I'd like to point out that the Yak-3P is quite an interesting aircraft, and really it is the end of an era in the Russian line, as most aircraft following this plane are made for higher altitudes, and this is the last truly definitive low altitude fighter. So, if you're looking for a Russian aircraft which is able to mix it up down low in both the turn and burn and boom and zoom categories, whilst maintaining a very strong armament to take out any foe it can face, then the Yak-3P is the plane for you. I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.